All right, so I figured that I would do a quick explainer on Tom Luongo's thesis because while there were plenty of reasons to support President Trump this time around, the one that makes me most excited for the future is this. What if the thesis is right? Like when discussing my optimism for Trump with all the nothing ever happens bros and black pillars, there are plenty of tangible things to bring up, like fixing immigration and the Doge and maybe even having a chance to put the woke away. But nothing is as game changing as the thesis. And the success of the thesis was fully dependent on a Trump victory. Tom Luongo has a monthly newsletter, Gold, Goats, and Guns. He has a Patreon. He goes on about 200 podcasts a week that you can see on YouTube and Rumble. And he's going to explain all of this better than I can. I am only going to give you the Cliffs Notes version of the thesis. If you find it interesting, please go seek out Tom's content for yourself. So the thesis starts with Jerome Powell being nominated by Trump. Luongo argues that the U.S. Federal Reserve, since Powell took over, has been asserting its independence by pursuing policies that prioritize U.S. financial sovereignty over globalist agendas. Imagine that. They care about us. Key tools in this strategy include raising interest rates and maintaining a strong U.S. dollar, even if these actions, and maybe especially if these actions, create economic pressure abroad. He suggests that the Fed is less interested in global coordination and doing what the WEF wants and what the City of London wants and what the European banks want. And it's more focused on strengthening the U.S. economy's control over global monetary flows. Because what those guys want over there is to put our banks out of business. And our banks, who Jerome Powell works for, don't want to go out of business. So that creates a pretty cool conflict. Yeah, yeah, I know. This meme is borderline internet blasphemy. How could I do this? Alex Jones, the Fed chairman, they're the same picture. But if Tom's right, then what Jerome Powell's doing is he's going to war with the globalist agendas. Well, that's probably horrible. I have a horrible voice. Um, but what we're seeing a direct conflict between the Fed and these European globalist financial institutions. And almost as importantly, the elite groups that are kind of tied to those institutions that have been trying to ruin everyone's lives for my entire lifetime. What the Fed's doing is it's tightening its monetary policy. It's so that it can reinforce the dollar's role as the global reserve currency. This creates scarcity in dollar denominated markets, forcing European and other global players to deal with rising debt costs. So Luongo asserts that this is part of a broader strategy to retain the U.S. dominance in the global financial system. And then, you look at these financial maneuvers and how they relate to geopolitical events like the war in Ukraine, an energy crisis in Europe, and these shifting alliances in the global order. And you can see that these Fed policies are either inadvertently or purposely destabilizing Europe's political and financial stability, forcing Europe to reckon with its reliance on external monetary policies and all of the fake austerity that it's been pushing, climate change and all this stuff. Sure, you would want to push a bunch of climate change agendas and say that carbon is the biggest problem in the world if you don't have any carbon yourself. So Europe has been acting like a crab at the bottom of a barrel, pulling all the other crabs that are climbing better than they can climb back into the barrel because they don't have any energy. And they've been playing a bunch of financial games to stay afloat. So, how did the Fed fight this? What's the specific element here? And that would be the transition from LIBOR to SOFR. LIBOR is the London Interbank Offered Rate. SOFR is the Secured Overnight Financing Rate. And the transition from LIBOR to SOFR is the pivotal moment in this whole thesis. Because LIBOR was a global benchmark interest rate heavily influenced by European banks. SOFR was developed by the Fed, and it's based on U.S. Treasury repo transactions and shifts power away from Europe and toward the U.S. Now we don't have a bunch of bankers in the City of London having an impact on what our interest rates are going to be. That's up to us, which we should have been. SOFR's adoption just completely reduces Europe's influence over all of the global financial markets. And it makes our influence much bigger. And I talked about the energy crisis in Europe. I mean, they don't have any. So these tightening policies, coupled with sanctions on Russia, have exposed Europe's vulnerabilities in energy and financial markets. So we raised the interest rates. Jerome Powell raised the interest rates. And the Fed increased the cost of borrowing in dollars, making it harder for heavily indebted countries, especially in Europe, to refinance their obligations. And they have a bunch of obligations. This strategy tightens global dollar liquidity, forcing a reevaluation of fiscal and monetary policies in countries outside the U.S. So, what are the broader implications here? Well, Luongo believes that the Fed's policies mark the end of the era of globalization, dominated by all of these European financial institutions, especially the City of London. And what we're looking at is a rebalancing towards nation-state sovereignty, with the U.S. reasserting itself as the dominant player in global finance. So Europe's future kind of looks a little bleak. And, it might end up being tough for everybody, but it's going to be tougher for them because they're at the center of the Fed's monetary tightening fallout, facing a mix of political instability and economic hardship. Look, the global south and emerging markets, they're probably going to be impacted pretty hard too. So we're going to see a lot of new alliances and financial systems that are outside of Western dominance. So let's put a bow on it because this really should be a short Cliff Notes version. Who am I to ask for a bunch of your time? So this is the whole game. We have Jerome Powell and a number of powerful Wall Street bankers like Jamie Dimon going head to head with the bad guys, like the big bads. If Tom is right and these guys are successful, then the globalists lose. The post-war consensus ends, and we get honest-to-God nationalism. I mean, we're talking about a golden age and solutions to our problems that aren't Fed posts. So yeah, go check out Tom's appearances and Gold Goats and Guns and his Patreon. Support the guy. He's a genius. He's brilliant. And he's funny, cranky, Gen X uncle. Also, I recommend you check out Stormy Waters. He's been on a bunch of shows like Mirror and Chuck Now, Pete Quinones, and Peruvian Bull. He's got a very interesting way of explaining this all. Probably much better than me. But, yeah. Thank you for your time and your attention. I hope this was helpful, and have a good day.